We have another interview with Warren Jeff's 65th plural wife next on Polygamy. What love is this? Several months ago, we interviewed today's guest when she told part of her story of having escaped and having been rescued as well from actual imprisonment in the FLDS polygamous community on the Arizona-Utah border. And as is true with most of us, her story is an ongoing journey, and we hope to be able to share in her journey with you and our viewers as well as it continues. It's quite a story, and it's a story that's worth telling when it comes to the topic of polygamy. We especially applaud her endurance because she has braved through a very painful and long-term healing process that few of us even can relate to. She still faces many challenges in that process. But she hasn't given up, and she isn't wallowing in a self-focused pity party, but is doing what she can and is being active in helping the rescue efforts of others who need to be rescued from this mind-controlled polygamous environments that were set in motion by Joseph Smith. We would like to introduce now and welcome back a previous guest, Briell Decker. Thank you for coming, Briell.
Thank you for letting me.
And thanks for your willingness to share your story. It's quite a story, ongoing.
Yes, yes. It's been really good for me to see a lot of different perspectives and be out here in this world. Is a experience that everybody should have.
Well, it's certainly for polygamy people who are born and raised in the confines of a polygamy environment. It's kind of shocking sometimes for us as we begin to learn about the outside world, and
Yes.
sometimes it can be pretty frightening as well. Now, what year did you leave?
It would be 6 years in May, so I can't remember the dates. I'm not good.
Well, not the day, just the year. So it's been 6 years since you've been out.
Yeah.
Now, your birth name, the name, just for clarification for later on in the show when we talk about your book, your birth name was Lynette Warner.
Right.
But you legally changed it. Why did you change it?
I changed my name because I was being chased, and they were trying to, even though I was overage, they were trying to say that I was crazy, and they had drugged me with doctors inside of the religion, and I wanted to never have to worry about having a relapse and finding myself back there. I just didn't want any risks, and so I went through the process of changing my social, my name, and I got legally adopted in the end. We weren't really planning on that at first, but it turned out that way.
Once you changed your name, they quit chasing you. They just stopped.
Yes.
It ended.
Yes, that's what I hear. I didn't realize that they were chasing me up to even clear to Tennessee until recently. That's what they say. I know they know now that I went to Tennessee, so I don't know if they are saying that or if they actually made it to Tennessee. I don't know, but they said they chased me clear there and then were told to turn around. But I was there for 2 years, so. Yeah,
and that was part of your journey, part of your process as you were learning about different things out in this big bad world.
And you helped me a lot in that. Yeah.
Well, that's what we want to do, is be helpful and continue to help people even a long time after they're out. And you've had a lot of resources, a lot of different organizations that's helped you, and that's what it's all about. We want to discuss 3 important things that are going on in Briell's life during this particular time. She's working with organizations that help people escape, and not only after they've escaped, but also to escape if they can. And she's working to educate those who are outside of polygamy, who don't know or who don't understand that what is going on in polygamy is actually human trafficking, and you want to bring awareness to that. And then she's working on a book, writing a book, telling her story of abuse and mind control and imprisonment and the evil doctrines taught by Warren Jeffs. So, and we're going to talk a little bit about that book as well. But let's begin with Warren Jeffs' doctrine of pedophilia. Now, we were having a conversation earlier this week, actually, and in that conversation, Briell mentioned that the reason that pedophilia is so widespread in the FLDS these days is because it's part of their doctrine, and that Warren Jeffs actually made pedophilia doctrinal. So I said, we need to talk about this, and that's what we're going to do. She said that it's because it is doctrine, that she was there when the doctrine was discussed, that that's not hearsay, it's not just something that you heard or made up.
It's not from a bishop.
You were there. Yeah, so tell us about that. Tell us what happened.
I was sitting in a training. I don't know if they know what training, have you discussed that before?
Well, you might want to bring it up to our viewers.
The reiteration of their doctrine constantly, so they called it a training every morning, and every evening we'd all sit through and listen to the reiterated doctrine of the interpretations of Warren Jeffs and the leaders before him that they recognize. I was sitting in a training, and Warren Jeffs was there, and he was leading it, and he read about the story. It's kind of a famous story among fundamentalists about Heber C. Kimball going in and going to see Joseph Smith, and Joseph Smith telling him that he needed to give up his wife to Joseph Smith. Mm-hmm. And so he fasted and prayed for many days. He brought his wife to Joseph Smith and submitted to give her up. And Joseph Smith told them both that they had passed the test and sealed them for time and all eternity together. And then at the end of his whole story, that's kind of a common story, Warren Jeffs inserted that their daughter, Helen Mar Kimball, was married at 12 years old to Joseph Smith.
And that's the story that Warren Jeffs told the people.
Told us, the elite. It's not common doctrine among the whole group, because only the elite get to know about the elite stuff. So he used Joseph Smith's experiences to bring forth the doctrine into the FLDS. But he changed that. Yes,
because that's not how it happened.
I hear, yes.
Yeah.
He was... I heard from you that the records that they have, the old records that they have of the polygamy and the things that we've been able to gather, she was actually 14. She
was 14 when he married her, according to all of the information that we have, yes. And he married a couple of other young girls. He married a 16-year-old and another 14-year-old too, as well, but they weren't 12.
Right, and that, in those days, as far as the laws went, as far as I understand, they... with parental consent, they could get married at that age.
Well, that's something that we'd have to look into as far as state by state. How that worked back then, I'm not even sure.
Without
legally,
the
12 years old
and stuff that we have nowadays.
But then Warren Jeffs would have tweaked that as well.
Yeah, he takes everything to the extreme.
Yeah,
he's a pedophile and he wants that, and so he just took it to the extreme to tell us that it's okay. God commanded this.
So because, and he proved it by Joseph Smith, using Joseph Smith as the example.
Yes.
And so at that time, then he instated, he actually brought in the pedophilia into the marriage practices of the FLDS?
Well, he had already started to, he was just explaining
I'm talking about making it doctrine.
Yeah, that's when he was putting it in the doctrine. So it's in the elite groups, but everybody that is going forward in that group has to eventually accept the elite doctrine. So it's in their doctrine. They're not going to be accepted into the highest degree of glory in the celestial kingdom unless they accept the elite doctrines.
The doctrine. So then he'd been taking young girls even before that.
He just didn't explain it to us until then.
What about the other men? What about the elite men? Had they taken young girls before that, or did they start taking at that time?
We had seen him. He introduced me to a few of his young brides. I knew his young brides, and one of them's out and talks now. She's on that Prophet of Evil the other night interview. But yeah, so I saw him, I was introduced to him, but I remember thinking, what are the laws here? And somebody said, oh, they're 16. No, they didn't say 16. They said, no, they are, it's legal here because it's Texas. And I found out later it was 16.
So you were down in the YFC ranch at that time?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah.
I didn't realize that that they had changed it to 16. Because at first when they went there it was 14, I believe.
Well, that's something else we'd have to look into.
I think Texas was 14 and then they changed it to 16 later on.
I know Utah changed theirs from 13 to 16 even with parental consent.
Yeah.
There's
a lot of details that go into the law, and see, I've just heard things. I haven't ever checked into it, but.
Right. So he said Helen Mar Kimball was 12, and so therefore it's okay because, and this is a perfect example of what Jesus said when he said, by the fruits of the false prophets we shall know them, and Joseph Smith's fruits are showing through just right there. He's using Joseph Smith's behavior to even bring about his own behavior. So that's what God wants. But what about these little girls that are married? Their body. He takes them right when they come into puberty, right?
Right. He would talk. He didn't put this in the doctrine really because it's not really doctrine, but he would talk about how God made us, God built us, and so I think he was referring to when the children's periods and things start. But he never talked about the brain and the psychological and the things that I've learned since, and how the brain actually doesn't even form all the way.
The maturing process continues.
But it has physical symptoms until you're 18. I didn't realize that. So that was really interesting to me. I'm like, oh, well, God made us, but he also made us. He made our brains too, so.
Right, and even at that, when a girl reaches puberty, she's still maturing. It's still a process that doesn't even come close to being completed at that time. It takes several years, the teenage years, to mature to adult.
And he would tell us how, I think this was in one of his sermons, how the girls in the priesthood they mature faster than people out in the world because they're sheltered. And
Jeez, that's evil. That is way wrong. So so he systemized pedophilia. He systemized trafficking, the trafficking of these young girls.
Yes,
Warren Jeffs did. He organized it, and from Canada to Utah and Texas.
Well, I'm sure that every father that was required to choose between giving up their daughter or giving up their entire family, because that's one of the rules, is that appointed marriage, everybody, even their wives, are gifts from God, and if they turn away from any requirement, they could lose their entire family. So it's like a choice between giving up their daughter to marriage at a young age, or else their whole entire family may not be able to protect any of the daughters. So when that happened, I'm sure that they were given that elite training when the fathers were making that choice. Some of them I heard took a day, whole day, to just in tears that they were even being asked to do something like that.
And doctrine equals behavior, and we've seen the behavior, we've seen the fruits of this, of all the ritual sexual abuse that has been going on in the FLDS. Now, you suffered abuse as a child, and you're going to include some of these things in your book. And of course, we only want you to talk about what you are comfortable talking about. And we don't want to tell the whole story anyway, because we want people to read your book when it comes out. But let's briefly talk about your abuse. So you were firsthand experienced it. Who abused you when you was a child?
It was my brother, the same brother that locked me up and is still in the cult. But he was only 12 at the time.
He was 12. How old were you?
I was 8.
Did he abuse your other siblings?
Yes, I had a sister older than me and a sister younger than me that were also abused at the same time when I was, and then I found out later that my older sister and him had already been caught and all of that. So that was really hard for me through growing up. I had a barrier that I had kind of built against my mother because I felt like if your child's struggling, then you should probably watch them closer because it went on for way too long. And
so your mother knew or didn't know? Or
she knew that he was struggling.
Yeah.
Because they had been caught before I was ever even brought in. But she had 14 children, and you know, I don't justify her, but I know that she cries all the time now.
You just understand more where she's coming from than
she's really hurt.
Time.
But yeah.
And so she didn't know that you were the abuse was going on quite as intense as it was.
Well, she knew about it before me and my little sister were pulled in. And then when we were pulled in, then I had a thought come to me one day that was just reminding me that I was supposed to tell if anybody did this to me. So I ran to my mother and told her, and my father was there. And they took us all individually in and talked to us. And then my older sister came to me after, and she's like, it's not going to stop. We've already had this happen. He comes back. And so I took my little sister and went in there and kind of, I had an experience I don't know how to explain. I just remember thinking, why did I say that? But I walked in and I told him exactly what he needed to hear, so that the weight that he was carrying it, because in the Mormon faith, and I believe in the Mormon faith, and the offshoots, they believe that at 8 years old you become accountable. So he was carrying this weight out of his curiosity that he would be damned forever. When I walked in and I said, let's do it again, he said, you will suffer from this for the rest of your life. If I would have begged him to stop, he would have just laughed at me. If I would have commanded him to stop, he would have just been angry with me. But because I lifted that weight off, like God lifted it off,
kind of an emotional thing for him,
then he stopped. He never came back. He blamed it on me, and I was willing.
So you were the scapegoat, the willing scapegoat.
Yeah, because I was younger, and I was like, my sister needs this. So I just accepted that.
What a burden for children to carry around. So is Warren Jeffs, we know he raped, he even said that he had abused and molested his daughters and his sisters, and Brett Jeffs wrote a book where he raped him when he was a kindergartner, and also his brother.
My statement is that the children are carrying a lot of the weight for the things that the brainwashing that the adults are going through, and that's why I feel like children, because especially nowadays, like Warren Jeffs has set it up to where he has say where everybody lives in the whole culture. He tells the children where to live, where the mothers get to live, who gets to stay around and who doesn't.
So he's still reassigning the families. So
the ones that are struggling stay. The one, it's just so sad to think that those children are carrying the weight for what those the brainwashing, and I don't think it's fair to those children.
It's not at all, and we'll talk about that in a little bit. Right now, let's talk about your book that you're in the middle of writing. It's a book. Actually, you have a writer helping you through it, Maddie Ivy Harrison. I wanted to mention her name, but anyway, the title of the book is Rescued and Restored, and we have a picture on the screen of that's a beautiful picture for your book cover. And the first 2 chapters have been released on Kindle. And it's kind of a rough draft. It's kind of a teaser, and you're still working on the rest of the book. But we wanted to talk about that a little bit, and I have a couple of quotes, too, from the first chapter. When do you expect your book to be finished?
I hear it takes longer than expected. Some people say that just to get a big publisher and agent is a year, and then they take a year after that. So it could be a while, but most people are telling me you need to make sure that you're really, really grounded. so that you're confident in your direction and everything.
In the text, in the actual telling of your story.
Yeah, and the whole thing. Like I need to really think about it, and I should take the time to do that. So I'm really considering that, because
so it's another process in your journey. Yeah.
Yes.
Have you found it difficult to write parts of your book, like you're reliving some of the terror that you went through?
Yes, I have days where I'm still like, I kind of disassociate when I go into a relapse. So I have the beginning signs of those, and I have to just sit there and hold off, and then I write some more and hold off, because I have to get through it.
I'm sure.
I feel like it's very important to be kind of I want to be like the voice for the children that are too hurt to talk.
And I believe that's where you're being led. I believe God is leading you in that direction, and where He leads, of course, He will supply. I want to quote where she begins in the book, and this is how you begin, first chapter. Quote, I was married at 18 to Warren Jeffs on January 9th, 2003. I had just turned 18 years old. I was born and raised in the FLDS religion. So here you are, all of a sudden you're going to get married. You're 18 though. I mean, that's bad, but the way it worked, but it's good that you weren't 13 when
my father helped me with that what he could at the time. So
to keep you from getting married too young.
Yes.
Well, that was good. That's not.
Yeah. I had friends that were married at 16 and different things, and my father wasn't really willing, so that he protected me, which was a blessing.
That's very good. You didn't know in advance that you were going to get married that day?
I didn't.
Okay, let's quote again from chapter 1, what she says about that. Quote, my father walked into the family room. I did not think anything of it at first. My back was to the doorway, but I still heard my mother when she screamed, no. This was the moment that would change my life forever. My father was flushed with emotion, but he said calmly, come, let's go on a drive, Lynette. And that did change your life. That's when you found out. You woke up that morning, it was your wedding day, and you didn't even know it.
Right. I had it talks about a whole day planned. And it was like 10 o'clock at night or something, though, this actually happened. And so I had no idea up until the time that happened. My father walked in that it was going to be that day. And he knew that he had turned me in. So he had written a letter stating to Warren Jeffs that I was now 18, I guess. And he said I was, he felt like I was ready to move on in my life if he felt like I was. Or something like to that effect. I don't know what he actually said, but the letter is to recommend your daughter for marriage. And he told me on the drive over there that he had written that letter that very morning. That morning,
and so Warren Jeffs just called you right in.
Yeah, and that doesn't always happen.
Did your father have a clue? I know you didn't, but did he know that Warren Jeffs would claim you to be his wife?
He didn't. He actually has told me since, why did it happen like that? Why? Because when I went in there, I actually felt really, really trapped emotionally from everything I'd heard and everything. And Warren Jeffs put the burden on me to say something about it, even after all the grooming and everything I went through. And so he asked me if I had an impression, and I didn't know how to get around it because I felt like there would be a repercussion for whatever I said. There wasn't really a good answer. But I knew if I said anything against what he had groomed me for, he would think I was lying.
Yeah.
And then I would get a repercussion for that. And so I was choosing between which repercussion I wanted. Yeah. And because I didn't know enough about marriage, I went that route. But my father asked me since, why did you say that? And I'm like, I felt trapped. Like, I tried to explain it to you, but,
Yeah, and you were trapped, and so, but you have to read the book to find out the rest of the story. And we've only got a couple of minutes left, so let's get into what you're doing right now. You're to actively reach out and educate the public and other things, what's going on. What are you doing?
I do public speaking, and I reach out to explain how to help. I want people to know what they can do to help, and the main thing is is like funding, funding for all these organizations that are out there helping. And yours is a major one that helps me even to this day, from the very beginning pretty much. And then my adoptive mom and Dream Center. So the Dream Center, I don't know if you want to...
Well, listen, if you can do it quickly, we don't have a whole lot of time yet, but please, yes, tell us what the Dream Center is.
So the Dream Center is, I went and got Warren Jeff's old house. The state has taken over his land because he's in prison for life in 20 years now because of these underage brides. And I went and got his house and sold it to the Dream Center, who's like turning it into like a crisis house for people that are first coming out and trying to find their way out into the world.
So it'd be a safe haven for them, plus a rehab for them too.
Yes, and if they talk to like you or Holding Out Help, then those are long-term plans for host homes and adoption and whatever it takes to get these people.
And you also
out.
want to educate others that this is trafficking.
Yes.
That this is actually trafficking that they're involved in, not just the FLDS, all the polygamy groups and underage marriages, or even overage if it's for sex purposes.
Yes, it's definitely, polygamy and trafficking go hand in hand, and there's a whole poem and things I wrote about that describe the steps and everything, because it matches the law. Like you bring in the law and what they require to be trafficking and considered trafficking, and then polygamy has those same factors, especially in what I know about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And so you're talking publicly to different groups of people around the area, even outside of the area, and you're doing interviews on the internet and other places, magazine articles. I've read several of those that you've done as well. So you're getting the word out, Briell. That's really wonderful. We all, each of us helping in each little part that we can do. And you've lived it.
Yes.
And recovering from it.
Yes, it's ongoing. I have a blog called Blogging with Bree, BRI.com.
Bloggingwithbree.com. Okay.
And it tells a lot of my journey. It's called Growing Step by Step. And
yeah, good.
So
good.
I try
okay, well, Briell, we want you back again, especially as your journey continues and when your book comes out. So thank you for coming. Appreciate talking to you again, and it's wonderful to see you and what's going on in your life. And you know, when we all think that what we choose to believe in is the truth, at least the truth for us. If we had our way, we would persuade others to believe our way as well, and most of us would if we could. But this culture that embraces Joseph Smith as being the greatest of importance, next only to God, believe that their prophet is God's mouthpiece for truth. And he's even more important, actually, than reading God's Word. But the only way anyone can know if they really have the truth is to honestly study opposing views using reliable resources. Well, Jesus said that we are to love the Lord our God with all of our minds. And yet polygamists and even Mormonism discourage independent thinking. And so we must ask, why aren't more people using the minds God gave them to discover the truth that God gave them? See you next time.